This is our 1991 BMW 318IS project car we built last year. This is an E30 chassis BMW. It's one of the last of the E30s. So the most famous of these E30 chassis cars are the M3s they made in this country from 88 to 91. And of course those cars are legendary for their racing prowess, European touring car championships left and right. They just won and won and won. But what I like about this car is, number one, it's a lot cheaper than an E30 M3. They've gotten way out of hand price-wise. But this has that modern M42 engine. It's a lot smoother. It's a 16-valve twin-cam engine, and it's just a lot nicer to live with as a street car than an M3. So we found this car. We were actually at an event, and we found this car as we were driving by a towing yard in Highlands, North Carolina. It was sitting there forlorn. It was moldy. It had been obviously sitting there for years, and we stopped later that evening and negotiated to buy the car for $450. We looked it over and realized that the original paint is still pretty good. Yes, most of the paint except for one repair on the quarter is all original. We buffed it out, but the car has what's called a slick top, meaning it has no sunroof. It has a cloth interior, factory cloth interior, which is very rare, and a nice color, original paint, slick top. We had to save it. So when we bought this car, the seller said it had engine problems. Now normally engine problems means a bad fuel pump or a timing belt or something relatively simple. This one had real engine problems. There's an idler gear that the cam chain rides on, and the mount had broken off, and that tore everything up. The cam chain was broken, the valves were bent, the engine was a mess. And we decided to take lemons and make lemonade, and we sent the engine up to Metric Mechanic up in Richland, Missouri, and they have a conversion that they do to make 2 liters out of these 1.8s. So we did that and ended up with about 50 more horsepower. They also went through the gearbox, and we went all through the suspension. We've lowered it. It's got iBox springs, Coney shocks. It's got all PowerFlex adjustable bushing, so we could get the camber and the caster exactly the way we wanted it. And mechanically, this car is virtually brand new from bumper to bumper. There's so much more we've done to this car. It's got a Z3 steering rack, which really tightens, quickens the steering. We've got adjustable camber plates from ground control. It's got an upper stress bar from UUC. There's just every modification we could make and still keep it streetable. That was the goal, is to have this thing comfortable enough to drive to the track, do a track day, and safely get home. And then inside the car, we had to redo the seats. They were all ripped up and moldy. We redid the seats. We put a new dash in it. We've got these gorgeous BBS 15-inch wheels. They're super light. They weigh about 11 pounds a piece. We've got Dureza tires, which is one of the better tires you can get for dual purpose use, and that's kind of it. The cool thing about this car is virtually every part is still available. We worked with FCP Euro, and they have every part for it. They've got most of it in stock. They ship regularly. They were just great to deal with and got us everything we need to get this car back on the road. Enough talk about what this thing is. What's it like to drive? To find out, we're here with JG Pasterjack, one of our editors, and he's going to take it out on track.
I will never pass up a chance to drive a great car on track. I love these cars when they were new. So since this car has been modified a little bit, since we did a few things, it should only improve the performance. I'm very excited to drive it on the official test track of Grassroots Motorsports, the Florida International Rally and Motorsports Park here in Keystone Heights, Florida. I cannot wait to get this thing out on track. When these cars were new, I really liked them. I liked the combination of competence and performance, and I love the fact that, and this is something that's true I think about most BMWs, is even though they might not produce amazing objective numbers, the capability that you have to use 100% of the performance is always there in every BMW for me, and that's very much true of this car as well. It was true of this car when it's new, and despite the fact that this is a modified car, literally every modification that Tim has done to it has actually made it better. It's made it more accessible. It's made it more fun. I drove this thing here today on the road, about 75 miles, and it's brilliant on the road And it's very rare to see a car that takes to modifications so well without hurting some factor of its performance or of its comfort or of its drivability. It does a lot of really cool things on track. Obviously, it's only 165 horsepower at the wheels, so there's not a ton of horsepower to deal with, but the chassis allows you to use the throttle. It's got great throttle response, and it's got great engine response in from like 4,000 RPM all the way to the red line, which I don't think I ever even got to, because it's like above 6,500 RPM. But it has this great engine control, this great engine response, and it lets you control the attitude of the chassis so brilliantly with the throttle. You can trail brake it into a corner a little bit. The ABS isn't working properly right now, so it's a little weird with trail braking, but you can trail brake it and get the car to bite. You can kind of affect what all four wheels are doing. But with the throttle, you can just really control the attitude of the car in a corner. So the combination of the limited slip differential, brilliant chassis control, and absolutely the right suspension setup just lets you do some amazing things with this car on track. It's really satisfying to drive.
So let's take a look at some of the data we got off of our Apex Pro data system from our 1991 318 IS BMW. One of the things that for me makes a car fun to drive is the ability to do a bunch of things at once. When a car gives you options and lets you drive it in different ways, that is a lot of fun, and that usually makes for a very forgiving, very responsive car. So let's take a look at some of the data here and see if we can back up the way we felt, very confident, very enjoyable driving the car with some of the data. Now the graph you see up here at the top is a plot of all of the G-forces the car is experiencing. Right now you see the blue dot with 0.08 showing. That shows a little bit of acceleration as we're heading towards a right-hand corner. Down towards the bottom you see the track map. We're circulating the track in a clockwise fashion, so we're approaching a right-hand corner that we're going to start braking for. And as I scroll through here, you're going to see what that G-trace does. Now down towards the bottom of the graph is braking force. Above the zero is acceleration force. You can see this is not a very powerful car, so there's not a ton of acceleration force above the zero. Most of the speed changing force is down below. And then on the right and on the left is lateral G-forces. So as we scroll forward, we'll see the car, the blue dot there, move towards the corner, and we can see ourselves transitioning into braking right here. So we're over half a G slowing down. Wasn't a super hard braking corner, but we did need to adjust the speed. Now, as we roll into that corner, we have to transition from braking into cornering. But because the car is so forgiving, we can make that transition by just trailing off the brakes and rolling into that corner. So when you watch that trace move, it doesn't move back to the center to a neutral position. We're releasing some of the braking while adding cornering. The car's letting us do those two things at the same time, and then we're transitioning back to acceleration even before the apex of the corner. So it lets us use the entire envelope of that tire's friction circle to do a couple things at once. So we can see as we accelerate out, we're bringing the power back on as we're still cornering, and finally transitioning to pure acceleration once we're well out of the corner. We never have to go back to a point where we reduce all of our cornering force to be able to add acceleration or deceleration force. Same thing is true for this next corner. We'll slow the car down just a little bit for this one, but then we can also start adding a ton of that cornering force while we're still slowing down just a little bit. And then as soon as we see daylight at the end of that corner, we start adding acceleration force while reducing the cornering force only slightly. So we're still doing a lot of cornering, but we're able to add a lot of acceleration, as much as the car can possibly give us, while we're still doing a lot of cornering. So the feedback through the seat told us the car was very forgiving, very easy to drive, like to do a couple things at once. And the data absolutely proves that out. The data we got back from our Apex Pro data system here. And it's nice when those two things match up and tell you that what you're feeling is actually what's happening.
Support brands that support Grassroots Motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.